Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Good Ballet, the Good Ballet Juju podcast, a fun kind of feel good podcast that I hope will make you smile and give you something nice to listen to while you're going about your day. And I'm here today with Rachel Fine from To The Point Nutrition. Rachel is a registered dance nutritionist / dietitian, and I thought since I'm always talking about good things like pizza, that it would be nice to have her on to share her thoughts about like nutrition for dancers and answer like a bunch of different questions. So hi Rachel, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
So we're talking now, and I was talking to Rachel about time difference. It's like 10, it was 11 in Singapore in the morning, and it's 10 p.m. over there where you are. Are you holding up okay?
Yeah, you know what? We have to be so thankful for just what we can accomplish with
Right.
the internet these days, to be able to have contacts. For me to say that I have contacts in Singapore is just so cool.
Yeah, you were saying that you've worked with people in Singapore as well. So it's kind of amazing that the internet is like a place where we can really connect in different ways.
Definitely. And, just bringing the messages that we're both bringing into the dance world, it's obvious that the dance industry as a whole, no matter where you're located, struggles with the same struggles, whether you're in New York City or in Singapore. So I think it's awesome to have these conversations and have them be worldwide.
I think that's a good point you were saying. I think the big reason why I did want to, have you on the podcast, and I know we tried to arrange this last year, we couldn't make it work, is because I used to struggle with like an eating disorder and anorexia and orthorexia. So for me, the idea of having to recover from that, and also seeing how other people in the ballet world kind of struggle with it is it's heartbreaking, and it's something that I hope nobody has to go through ever. So I think just to have you on and talk about being finding ways that we have a healthy relationship with food, and debunking all these like myths and things is like really important, and just kind of preaching the idea that we should be able to enjoy pizza, and that we shouldn't have to live some kind of crazy restrictive life, whether or not we're a professional dancer or non-professional dancer. I think that's important to me, and I feel like it's the same for you too.
100%. I mean, the whole reason why I am where I am today and why I went into this is because of my own struggle, just like you experienced with orthorexia, and thinking that the only way for me to be a successful dancer was to have this quote unquote perfect diet. And in my striving for this unrealistic perfect diet led me to burnout, and it really limited me as a dancer. And my goal is to just show dancers that them striving to consume this perfect quote unquote clean or healthy diet, or restricting their favorite foods, whether that be pizza, whether that be chocolate chip cookies, it's not helping them, because food should definitely fuel our performance, and it's important to understand how it can do that, but it also has to fuel our soul, and it has to fuel our mental health. So one thing that took me so long to learn and understand was that just as important as food is to my physical health and my physical performance, it's also important to my mental health. And once I finally learned that, I'm pretty sure I never danced better. And I never danced freer.
There's so many things I want to get into, but it reminds me of, I tell the story sometimes about when I was first started seeing a dietitian when I was recovering from eating disorder, and asking her like, can I eat this and can I eat that, and is this good for me and is that good for me? And then she was like, she looked at me and was like, do you enjoy eating that food? I was like, yes. She's like, does it give you happiness? And I said, yes. She said, well, happiness is an important nutrient.
Yes. This is so true. I often say satisfaction is the fourth macronutrient, because for me as a dancer, I remember being obsessed with protein, fats, and carbs. And those were the 3 macronutrients, and I had to get them in my day. And I teach dancers today about those 3 macronutrients and how important they are. But one major macronutrient that I never knew about was satisfaction, and actually choosing foods that made me happy and made me feel satisfied throughout the day.
Exactly. But first, I think I want to, you talked about you being a dancer. Can you tell me a bit about your dance journey going from you're a dancer, like what your background was and how you went from there to becoming a nutritionist?
Sure. So I would say you could define me as like your classic bunhead. I did all types of dance, from ballet and contemporary to even jazz, tap, and modern. But ballet, especially classical ballet, was always my favorite. Always really what I wanted to pursue. It still is my favorite type of dance. I just always felt that I could kind of get lost in the music. And it was like my exit until I got a little bit too obsessed. But we can talk about that. But even, today, I would say classical ballet is just where I really put most of my energy. I studied throughout. I basically started when I was 6 to today. I've been studying ballet. So pretty much my entire life. I followed a pre-professional track. I danced throughout New York City, did some freelancing. Where I studied, though, included Ballet Academy East in New York City and at American Ballet Theater. There are summer intensives every summer. So I did a lot of pre-professional training, did some freelance professional work, but once I really started doing more of the professional work was when I really burnt myself out. So simultaneous to this, I decided that I wanted to go to college and pursue a degree in nutrition because I was becoming very interested in how to fuel my body, but I was confused at the same time. I would look up things on the computer. I mean, this was like 10 years ago. So like we had easy access to Google, etc. So I would try and find out, what foods I should be eating as a dancer. And I was just confused. There was a ton of information. Nothing was really geared towards dancers at the time. It was more towards like either athletes or non-athletes. And dancers really, stand alone. We are athletes, but we're also artists, and we're really in this aesthetic type of sport. So, which unfortunately is so centered around body image. So I was really confused. I was stuck, and I kind of just wanted to dive into nutrition full force. And that's when I decided to get my degree and go to college for it. So I figured, you know what, I can still dance. I could be in New York City. I can go to school, still dance on the side. And that's essentially what I did. And then I ended up really just developing this passion for nutrition and wanting to take it just one step further, getting my licensure as a dietitian. And then I always wanted to specialize in dancers. I did dip my feet in clinical nutrition. So I worked at a hospital for a couple of years, but I always in the back of my mind wanted to work with dancers. I remember I would see dancers in the evening hours. I was still dancing myself, so I was always in that world, and really even just helping some of my peers throughout time. And then eventually I made the full switch to just creating To The Point nutrition and solely working with dancers.
Right. And so what's the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian?
That's a great question. So a dietitian has to be licensed to practice, especially if it comes to something like medical nutrition therapy, which is really implementing nutrition therapy for any type of ailment. I mean, that could be working with malnutrition, that could be working with dancers who might be diagnosed as underweight or have an eating disorder or even have disordered eating, which there's a difference there between eating disorders and disordered eating, versus a nutritionist. So anybody can call themselves a nutritionist. Anybody who has an interest in nutrition and maybe feels that they want to educate others about food or eating can call themselves a nutritionist. But in order to actually practice under the law and practice legally and to really implement medical nutrition therapy or nutrition, just standard nutrition therapy, you want to be licensed, or you want to work with a licensed professional. And that would be a registered dietitian, or also called a licensed dietitian.
Right. And so you mentioned the difference between there's eating disorders and disordered eating. Maybe there's a generalization, but I almost feel like almost everybody kind of struggles with disordered eating in some way, especially in current society today. How true do you think that is? And second, what is the difference really between an eating disorder and disordered eating? And when is the point where you think where you should get help? So that's a whole bunch of questions. We'll go one at a time.
Well, you hit it spot on in saying that there's a difference between disordered eating and an eating disorder, and B, being that most people in today's day and age have some degree of disordered eating. And this is simply because our society, and what's cool is that you're in Singapore, I'm in the US, this is something that is worldwide. This isn't just for dancers. This isn't just for New Yorkers, or this is literally worldwide. As a culture, as a population, as humans, we are drenched in diet culture. The world is obsessed with dieting. It's obsessed with weight loss, looking a certain way. And that look has changed over time, to be what it's at today. So there is a spectrum. So when we're talking about the differences between disordered eating and eating disorders, we're looking at a spectrum. And where you fall along this spectrum, it differentiates who you might be needing, or the type of support or help you might be needing. So one end of the spectrum being more severe diagnosed eating disorders like anorexia nervosa or bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder. The other end of the spectrum being something like dieting. Dieting is one of our biggest risk factors to actually developing a diagnosed eating disorder. So essentially, you can think of disordered eating as this umbrella term that refers to this spectrum, and the extremes of the spectrum. One end of the spectrum being those diagnosed eating disorders that we all kind of know about, like anorexia nervosa, bulimia, binge eating disorder. The other end being something just as dieting, trying your first type of diet, whether it's keto or intermittent fasting, all of these very common diets that we hear about in our culture that you wouldn't think of being an eating disorder can really take someone down a path of that spectrum of disordered eating and lead them to a diagnosed eating disorder.
Right. And so, when does it get to the point where you think where somebody should seek help? Because, there are people who, for personal reasons, may want to say they go on a keto diet or whatever, but, maybe that impacts some amount of what they eat and that's restricted, but at the same time, they can still, maybe it works for them and they're healthy.
Sure.
And they have energy and they feel good. So at what point does it become something that somebody should seek help for?
Well, I suggest that you look at the different realms of well-being in our life. So we have our physical health, we have our mental health, and we have our emotional health. So when your eating behaviors are starting to affect other realms of your life, like your mental health, your emotional health, maybe your social life, if your eating behaviors are preventing you from experiencing celebrations or social gatherings, or you feel that you can't attend an event because they're not going to have specific foods that you need. If you feel an overwhelming amount of anxiety about an event that's coming up or around different foods, if you feel an overwhelming amount of anxiety if a certain food is not of access to you, perhaps you don't know the ingredients of every meal that was created for you, that's when we start to say, okay, well, something's not quite adding up, that your quote unquote healthy lifestyle is not necessarily supporting the health of all aspects of your life. It's actually starting to limit you in some aspects. This is when we have to start considering reaching out to professionals like registered dietitians and mental health therapists, to see why are your eating behaviors starting to restrict you in other ways?
Yeah, I think for me, when I decided to get help, it was the idea that, obviously there were the things like just being completely weak and just low energy all the time. And also I think what you're saying, the overarching idea is if you feel very unhappy and it's because of your food choices that are causing you a lot of unhappiness, that's when you should. And if you think you have a problem, that's when you probably do.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up those, like the physical ailments of an eating disorder, like maybe being very tired, maybe chronic injuries. The reason why I don't put those first on the list for dancers is because I think so many dancers are unfortunately trained to ignore a lot of those symptoms. You know what I mean? So for example, one major symptom of where your eating behaviors or your disordered eating has gone too far is if you lose a period for 3 or more months for females. Okay. This is now going to risk your long-term bone health. But so many times I hear, even from dance parents, oh, but it's common that dancers don't get a period. Just because it's common doesn't make it normal. Just because dancers are always injured doesn't necessarily make it normal. So it's important to realize, you're right, all of these different symptoms, from our physical health to also our mental and emotional health, and what is being limited here by those restrictive eating behaviors.
It's a good point where you said that it's not normal, because I mean that's the thing about ballet, like, or even any elite performance sport at a high level, like it's not normal to be dancing with like when you're all with like a sprained ankle or something. The same way it's actually, as much as we say celebrate the Olympics, it's not normal for a gymnast to be out there competing on the on the floor with like a broken foot, or like a dancer do that. And it's, something we glorify as like peak athletic performance. And it's amazing that they, managed to push through that pain. And that's a very normal thing for dancers to say, you have to push through the pain. You have to push through everything.
Right. Exactly. Now, one thing that's so interesting is because I recently was actually speaking to a client who was saying that, she was basically like, I get what you're saying, Rachel. I want to be able to eat all of these foods, but at the same time, I'm in a sport that is not meant to be normal. And, my response to that is, at least for dancers, we are very body aware beings. Okay. We're very body aware. I mean, you can reach a point in your dancing where you are doing it in very proper alignment and not necessarily hurting your body. So I think that dancers should realize, like, there are ways to dance without pushing your body to any physical pain, or even with our eating behaviors. Like you can be a successful dancer and not have to live in these abnormal extremes.
It's the idea that we glorify the idea of suffering, don't we? Like you have to suffer. And but I also think that when I coming back to the idea of low energy, there's that myth that some people say, oh, there's no way that you can be a principal dancer or like dance all these crazy variations if you don't eat, or you don't have an eating, or you have an eating disorder. And that's just kind of not true, because I mean, I'm not a professional dancer, but I can speak from experience of like eating very little calories and exercising 3 hours a day and getting a lower degree, that like you can push your body to do crazy things, despite it being severely malnourished. It doesn't mean that you don't need help.
Absolutely. You know, our body is not necessarily, so sometimes people will relate our energy like a car, like it needs gas to move, but our body is not a car actually, because a car, if it doesn't have gas, it will stop running.
Yeah.
Our body is not like that actually. Our body can continue to run even if it doesn't have gas, even if it doesn't have enough food. But it's so much smarter than you think, okay? Because our body is then going to start to sacrifice other things that's going to risk things down the road. So sure, it's going to continue to run even on low fuel, but it's going to start taking away energy from vital processes like your reproductive system, your hormonal balance. And this is all causing a hurricane effect of your long-term health, impacting your bone health, which is critical for a dancer. I mean, this is why we see so many dancers sitting out for petit allegro with stress fractures, because they're not building strong bones. And of course, at the end of the day, burnout, something that you experience and something that I experience, which really can cut a dancer's career short.
Yeah. You know, and for me, I sort of have like the opposite thing in the sense of like a lot of ballet dancers where they come into, you know, start learning ballet, and then that's when they start feeling very conscious of their body and they start restricting. For me, it was kind of the opposite of like getting into ballet and realizing that if I didn't eat enough, and it's still like a journey, but I didn't eat enough, I wouldn't be able to do well at like ballet or gymnastics or my work. I just wouldn't have the energy, I wouldn't have the brain power to do it.
Right.
So it's also that thing of like, if you fuel your body the way, if you give your body the nutrition and the fuel it needs, and you know, in terms of eating enough, I think that's a really important thing. It's amazing how much more you will be able to do and how much stronger you will be and how much better you'll feel doing what you're doing.
Exactly. You know, when we fuel our body, we give our body the tools it needs to build muscle and to build endurance. And these are the stepping stones of a solid performance. Otherwise, you're weak and you can't really obtain and optimize your training.
But is it too idealistic to say that, you know, if you are a student or professional, you're dancing, like you're moving 5 to 6 hours at least a day, that as long as you eat a balanced diet, you're probably going to be in the best shape of your life, and you shouldn't really have to worry too much about, you know, eating to be leaner or eating to be in a better shape. Is that too idealistic a notion?
That's a good question. I mean, unfortunately, our industry is drenched in body ideals. We can't ignore that fact. But that being said, it is still changing. It's shifting. And individual dancers should focus more on their actual fueling needs and building a balanced lifestyle around their food choices, you know, incorporating balanced meals and snacks. They should put body weight off the table, because the second that we do start thinking about body weight and obsessing about body weight, that's when we fall into those behaviors that really risk the sustainability of our habits. So behaviors like calorie counting or macro counting, or any type of major external food rule around our food choices, it's going to restrict and limit the mental space you have for dance and for your artistry. I don't think it's too idealistic of a notion for a dancer to take weight off the table and focus only on building a balanced lifestyle and incorporating foods that they love. I don't think that's too idealistic for an individual dancer. Is it in an ideal world for a dance industry as a whole? Like, are we still combating old school teachers and directors? Unfortunately, yes, we are still combating that, but I am very confident that the industry is shifting and dancers are developing more of a say in what the industry looks like. So as long as we keep up with that road. So, you know, it's give and take. For an individual dancer listening right now, I would say take your body weight and take your body shape off the table. Focus on your fueling plan. An industry as a whole, we are still battling those unrealistic body ideals, but it's shifting and it's changing. So it's important for you as an individual to focus on your strength, endurance. And in order to do that, you're building a balanced fueling plan.
Right. And so then the focus should mainly be on how we feel and how we perform, whether or not we're a professional, or like me, just an adult who, muddles through class a couple of times a week. We should just be focusing on not how we look or what our weight is, but how well we dance and how good we feel with the food that we eat.
Yeah. As a dancer, it's not our sole purpose to be skinny.
Yeah.
It's our sole purpose to transcend an audience.
Yeah.
That's a goal. That's a major goal for a dancer, because dance is an art.
Exactly.
So to transcend your audience who's watching you, whether you are an adult taking class as a hobby, or whether you're a pre-professional dancer who's eventually looking to audition for companies and training programs, you want to focus on your artistry, because that's what's going to steal the attention of the directors and the attention of the audience. So focus on that instead of solely focusing on changing your body shape. Because again, once that thought trickles into our head, it really does become limiting, and it's limiting onto your abilities as a dancer.
So what about the idea of intuitive eating? Like, what is it really, and how feasible is that for, well, I would say society in general, but maybe since we're talking about dancers, like dancers specifically, because, you did mention that sometimes, and I think this is, that sometimes we do have to eat mindfully. So where do we find that balance between eating intuitively and eating mindfully as well?
Yeah. So what is intuitive eating? Well, intuitive eating, it's a non-diet approach that teaches us how to have a healthy relationship with both food and our body. And this approach was created by two registered dietitians over almost now, it's been 2 decades, Evelyn Triboulet and Elise Resch. If you haven't read the book Intuitive Eating, I do suggest it. It really actually breaks down 10 principles of how to build a sustainable lifestyle. And it begins with rejecting the diet mentality and this restrictive mentality or eat less mentality around food, and instead starts to teach you how to celebrate food and appreciate food for what it can do for your body. Now, specifically for a dancer, that means it is fueling you. It's fueling your performance. It's allowing your body to build strength and endurance. Everything I kind of said before. Now, here's the thing with dancers, though. We are athletes, okay? Especially if you're dancing 5 to 7 hours a day, your energy needs are higher than that of the general population. So we have to balance intuitive eating with performance nutrition or sports performance nutrition, okay? And this is personally why I wanted to become certified in 2 different things. I'm certified as a sports dietitian and I'm certified as a counselor of intuitive eating, because I realized, because there's really no official certification for dance nutrition.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll get there, but it's not there now. So I figured,
crossed.
I wanted to fuse both of these 2 major principles because they both play such important roles in a dancer's diet. The performance nutrition end is really learning how to build a proactive plan to fueling your dancing. So here's just a very small example. Intuitive eating says, we eat when we're hungry, we stop when we're full, and we choose foods that really satisfy us. Now, that is a very basic approach to what intuitive eating is. So don't even think it's really so much more than that, but this is just one brief example. Now, for dancers who are busy all day or in rehearsals all day, they might not necessarily feel their hunger. Okay, which means that going off of our hunger cues could sometimes be a little bit impractical for dancers. So this is where we have to begin fusing these 2 principles of a proactive approach, performance nutrition, planning our meals and snacks ahead of time, but also when can we incorporate those principles of intuitive eating? How can we reject restrictive diet culture and still choose foods that are satisfying us, yet again, using what's called gentle nutrition, which is this like non-obsessive approach with nutrition information and applying that to our meals and snacks. I hope that makes sense. I gave a
Yeah.
very broad overview.
No, yeah, that totally makes sense. Because I also feel like one thing that, and I think this is common as well in the industry of perfectionists, is that people always struggle with, well, I know I do as well. I will fully confess I don't have a perfect relationship with food, is the idea of food guilt. And I just remember, when I was going through my eating disorder, is that, and I feel like this is applies to dancers as well, is the idea that, if you want to do your best, why would I put in something into my body that I would consider like not as clean because it's not as disciplined, or I could just be doing a disservice to my body by not putting in like the what signs or the articles or let's say it's like the best foods, like only the clean foods into my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that I'm sure that a lot of dancers struggle with as well.
Yeah. Obsessing over clean eating, I think, is probably one of the most common struggles that dancers have. This was exactly my struggle that I had 10 years ago, because we think, and it totally makes sense to think this way. I don't blame dancers for thinking that our body is our instrument. The foods we put in it are going to impact what we put out of it on the stage. Okay. So if we think of it in terms like that, then yeah, the clean, healthy foods are what's fueling our performance best. Those complex carbs, those lean proteins, healthy fats, and all of that is super important. And I talk about all of that with the dancers that work with me. But we also have to remember, and I spoke about this before, it's not just our physical health that's impacting our performance. It's also our mental health. And that plays a huge role in our artistry on stage. So fueling your mental health is just as important as your physical health. So if you have this super clean diet and it's preventing you from going and celebrating your best friend's birthday party because you're too scared about the foods that are offered, well, that's an experience now that you can't take with you to the stage. See, what we bring to the stage is so much more than just our tendus and our développés and our technique. It's also our experiences. That's what creates depth to our performance. So making sure that you have room for that and space for that in your lifestyle is important, and it's just as healthy.
And so what was your experience like with your eating disorder, and how did you recover from that, if you don't mind sharing a little bit?
No, of course. So I actually was never officially diagnosed with an eating disorder in my past. I had very clear disordered eating, and in hindsight, I should have been diagnosed with orthorexia, but orthorexia is actually not even considered an official diagnosis. And the reason for that is because it's just such a gray area. We're eating healthy, we're eating all of these great foods, but where does the disorder come into that? It's not necessarily that we're restricting calories, but we're restricting the types of foods. And like I said before, in one of the first questions you asked, we're restricting other aspects of our life. For me, it was restrictions on my social life, on my ability to enjoy holidays with families. I remember having a Thanksgiving once and just running into the bathroom to assess what I ate. You know what I mean? Making sure that I didn't go crazy, and making sure that I only chose the healthy options. That wasn't a way to enjoy Thanksgiving in the States. You know what I mean? We should be enjoying it for what it is, for the holiday that it is, not obsessing, making sure that I followed the rules of this ideal, unrealistic diet plan that I had in my head. So my battle was mainly with orthorexia and with my obsession with wanting to eat healthy. And again, and I say this to the clients that come to me, I can't blame myself for thinking that way. I mean, everything in our culture is about eating healthy. And I'm a perfectionist. I'm type A. So you give me an ounce of information, well, I'm going to take it to the umpteenth degree. Okay. You tell me to do something 100%, I'm going to do it 200%, and I'm going to top you, right? That's just who
I feel that on a deep personal level.
I'm sure most dancers listening to this are going to understand that, right?
Yeah,
right? Like, you tell us to do something, we're going to do it 5 times better than you tell us to do it. So not like more than 5 times better. So that was my problem. I was reading all of this information about eating healthy and sticking to a great diet, clean eating, etc. And I was saying, okay, well, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to just do it better now. And I'm going to keep doing it better until I drove myself to burnout. And that's exactly what happened to me. It drove me to burnout. It took away my love for dance, because it just turned dance into this a job, like a job without even, I'm not saying like it could be a great career, but for me it was a job, and my passion and my love for it went out the window because I was too obsessed with making sure that everything was perfect. And I had to take 2 steps back in order to realize that it's an imperfect art, and there's no such thing as a perfect diet. And I have a major sweet tooth. So me restricting that for myself was only driving me again to burnout and resentment against this very thing that I once loved, ballet, that I felt was basically saying, no, you can't eat this, you're a ballet dancer. So I had to really eradicate this entire mindset.
And so how did you manage to, do that?
So luckily I was able to see this for myself, and to see that, I grew up in a very close-knit family with a lot of occasions. Sunday night dinners were always a big, important aspect of my life growing up. So as I started to become disconnected from those experiences, I was able to recognize on my own, like, something's wrong. I went from enjoying all of this stuff to becoming very stressed and anxious. And I knew something was just wrong, and I had to really fix it. And that's when I said, you know what, I'm going to make a career switch right now. And I'm going to start studying nutrition because I want to learn more about healthy eating. And I did have this like love where I wanted to learn more about it, but I needed to learn how to do it in a more sustainable way. And that's kind of when I took myself out of the professional dance world into this academic world, where I was still able to dance. I never stopped dancing, but it helped me just find a little bit more balance.
I sort of, when I recover from eating disorder, it's amazing how much freedom that you find now with food, and it's still a process. Sometimes I'll still, like I'll have I'll pinch like a little cookie or something, and I'll be like, I can't believe I'm doing this now. This is so different from what I used to do, But I think it's also the thing of, dancers are perfectionists, and it's also important to remember that like there's no such thing as perfect recovery in a sense. Like, I mean, like I still have issues with food, and I think everybody still does as well. And it's just about, I mean, for me, right now it comes to a place of accepting that like I don't have a like perfect relationship with food in the sense that I'm not going to be able to perfectly eat intuitively, or some things I might still struggle with. But as long as overall I'm making sure to keep my body healthy and happy, and find ways to like manage when food still gives me anxiety and things, and that's like the main thing that kind of, then that's, I think it's the idea of accepting that it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be good enough at this point.
Absolutely. I say this all the time, but building a positive relationship with food and our body is a journey. It's not a destination. So even for someone like myself, I've officially devoted my entire career and life to this work. I still don't even define myself as having a ideal, or I don't even want to use the word perfect, but fully quote unquote recovered relationship with food and body image. Especially with body dysmorphia, I think I still have my days, but I know now how to manage it and how to handle it, and what tools, I've created my own personal toolbox of ways that I can manage through destructive thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. And do you think that, especially now, because we connected through the internet and through Instagram, and I think social media is a great tool for connecting people, but do you think, in a sense, social media can play a part in, especially with younger dancers, encouraging certain restrictive eating behaviors? And I ask this because sometimes my worry is when I see dancers saying that, oh, I'm going to become vegan. And there's nothing wrong with being a vegan dancer, or nothing wrong with being vegan. It's a great cause to take up. But sometimes I feel like it can be a mask for restrictive eating. And, when younger dancers are very impressionable when they are influenced by that and saying, oh, this dancer I look up to is vegan, or this friend I'm following on Instagram is vegan. Maybe I should try that too. And then it's not really vegan, but vegan restrictive, and it just kind of, it's very easy to look at what other people are doing on social media, is what I'm saying, and emulate certain behaviors, which at the end of the day may become very unhealthy or lead you down like a path of disordered eating.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Social media could be helpful, and it could be a major hindrance in someone's journey to developing a positive relationship with food and body. So 100% dancers can see professional dancers even posted. And I just actually had this. I had a dancer send me a message like, hey, go take a look at what this dancer posted. This dancer had over 150,000 followers. She's a professional dancer. I obviously won't say any names, but she was posting some questionable content about what she was eating that day. And, I had to respond to this dancer, like, I don't support what she's doing. I know it's hard to listen to someone like me who, a dietitian, whereas this woman is a professional. She's a principal dancer in a very reputable company. But that being said, I don't support her eating behaviors because they're not going to support her long term, especially for younger dancers who now have their dance needs on top of their growth needs. They have double the amount of energy that they're burning. So hearing those messages can be extremely damaging. And it is so important that we cultivate a social media feed that supports a positive relationship with food for dancers. This is also really important for the dance industry as a whole, that we are cultivating a feed of diversity, whether that's diversity with our body shapes, diversity with skin color, diversity with different cultures in the dance world. It is so important that we use our social media feeds for the benefit of cultivating diversity in the dance world, because that's the only way that we're going to change those ideals of what a quote unquote ideal ballet body looks like. Well, to start doing that work, we have to start with who we're following.
Yeah. And I mean, like I was saying, there's no ideal ballet body. Like, exactly. I feel like you could ask 5 principal dancers at the top of their game, and they all have different things about their body that they like and they don't like, and they don't all look exactly the same.
100%. Absolutely. And the way we encourage younger dancers to do that is by changing who they're following and encouraging that they're following a diverse feed, a diverse social media feed, just because that is what's going to really improve our what's called implicit bias to what we see in the dance world.
Yeah. And it's interesting you raised the point about diversity, because I do want to ask you a question, which is that, people might say, whether fairly or unfairly, but I think it's interesting that maybe it's easier for you to talk about having food freedom and being body positive when you're a white, slim woman who may not experience the same kind of discriminations in that sense, or that maybe other people who are of color or who are naturally bigger have, or because you are a more socially acceptable size. So, what would your response be to that? I mean, it's a tricky question.
Yeah, that's a great question. No, it's a great question. I've definitely spoken about my thin privilege. I 100% attest to the fact that I have thin privilege, and I am in a body size that is seen in our society as being more socially acceptable. And I will never claim to understand the feelings of what one faces in our society of being in a larger body.
Yeah.
Because I've never experienced that. And I've never experienced, for example, going into a store and not having the size clothing that I can fit in. Okay. I've never experienced that, and I'll never claim to experience that. What I have experienced is body dysmorphia and just having an overall dissatisfaction with my body, no matter, even though I am in a socially acceptable body type, I do have body dysmorphia, and I do struggle with feeling like I am enough in my current body. So 100% I have to attest to the fact that I have thin privilege in our society. And at the same time, I also have body dysmorphia. So I am always trying to work on my own body image, my own personal body image. And I feel that that is probably easier for me to do versus someone who is in a larger body. But, you know, as long as I can continue to do this work and help as many dancers as I can help, who are willing to hear me out, then that's what makes me happy. I just really like to take dancers on my own personal journey with body dysmorphia, even though, like I said, I am in a more socially acceptable body shape. And I don't know what it feels like to be in a larger body. But I will always encourage that dancers, again, diversify their feed so that we together as an industry can change the bias that our industry holds in regards to body aesthetics.
Yeah. And I think listening as well to other people's experiences is important as well. Because, you know, based on the fact that I may not be like this, how do I put this? Like, I know I'm a relatively petite, small woman, so I've never had the problem of, say, having clothes not fit me, even though I struggle with eating disorder and I've been overweight before. It's different from, say, being obese, or even the fact that even when I was overweight, because of the fact that I'm smaller, I've never had the problem of not finding clothes that fit me.
Sure.
And it's a lot about listening to what other people's experiences are and what they struggle with, and listening to that feedback. Because I know that for me, you know, I make dance wear, and some of these things I'm not aware of regarding plus sizing, and you know how some other people may not feel that there's enough dance wear that accommodates their size and things like that. And you know, like you said, it's a lot about diversifying your feed and just making sure to be sort of aware of what we have in the sense of the privileges. But I feel like it's always a tricky thing because we can never fully understand, you know, other people's experiences.
You know, I have to be honest, this is not just true for body shape. This is true for anything. I also recently found myself needing to learn more about the transgender community. Yeah. I know this is like totally coming from left field, but I realized this is just a couple weeks ago that I didn't know enough about this community. And I truly, in the most humbling way, just needed to learn. So I asked a friend, I was like, hey, can you send me 10 accounts, 10 of your favorite transgender dance accounts that I can just start to follow, because I need to learn more about this community. I am not transgender. I don't know what it feels like to be transgender, and I can't claim to know what that feels like. So I want to learn more about this community, and I want to support them the best I can. And the only way I can do that is by learning. And getting educated. So I think that's important. You know, that all comes with who are, again, I hate to keep bringing it up, but who we're following on social media, and really learning and just educating ourselves about the privileges that we have, the privileges that I personally have in my life, and becoming more aware of varying communities out there so that I can speak to everybody. And even if I can't speak to everybody, at least start to listen to other communities.
Yeah, and I mean, coming back to the idea of body image in ballet as well, I feel like the more that we diversify the kinds of people we're following and the kinds of people we're seeing, we start to realize that, you know, like you said, there isn't one shape or type of person who can dance and dance well. You know, there's room for lots of different kinds of body types and lots of different kinds of individuals in ballet as well. And like the more we diversify the feeds, the more we see more of different kinds of dances, the more we'll sort of realize that and internalize that. And hopefully that will help us, you know, have a healthy relationship with ourselves and try to, I guess, push, I don't say push, but just be mindful of the change that we need in the dance world and how we can be part of it.
Absolutely.
So I just want to go through like just really quickly a couple of like quick maybe nutrition pointers for people. Obviously, you know, if people want something more in depth, they should, you know, work with you directly, but just like something quickly. What sort of, say, supplements should dancers be taking, if any?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I just want to say I have an entire online course that's free about nutrition supplements. So I do recommend that dancers go take that. It's on my website, dancenutrition.com. It's a 3-day course and it's free. But aside from that, in a very general way of speaking, a multivitamin can always just help us fill in the gaps of our diet. Some dancers might need to add a calcium vitamin D to their day just to help with their bone development. And then sometimes even a protein powder can help dancers just with some recovery, just with boosting their protein intake. If they're vegan or vegetarian, that can also help as well. And then there's a couple other supplements that are harder for me to generalize for the general population, but iron and B12 are up there as well. I don't recommend them for just any dancer. So I would say, you know, for any dancer, you can consider a multi and a calcium vitamin D. If you want to maybe go a little bit deeper, you can ask a medical professional like your doctor about maybe your iron levels, your B12 levels, those are pretty much the big ones.
What about, you know, the supplements that people say help recovery, like turmeric or tart cherry? Should we be like, is that something that we should be looking at, or is it mostly just optional, and can we get those mostly from Whole Foods?
Yeah, I definitely have a food first approach when it comes to a lot of these claims. Most of these claims around supplements like that, whether it's a hair nail supplement, tart cherry juice, turmeric, you know, like I said before, have a food first approach. We can definitely get those nutrients from whole foods. A lot of the claims on supplements are just not regulated in the same way food is regulated. So we don't necessarily know what we're getting when it comes to the actual supplements we're taking. So if you are taking a supplement, you do want to make sure that it's third party tested, which basically means that's a company is testing for the actual contents in the supplement. But that being said, a lot of supplements can be more of a money maker. And if you can just get it from Whole Foods, that's what I would recommend first.
Yeah, you mentioned like protein powders. What about things like protein powders and protein bars? Because I can understand how they can be a quick snack, but at the same time, I feel like I'm not sure, and maybe you could shed light on this, whether it's the healthiest thing for people to eat because they are very, very processed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So protein powders I like because protein powders we can add to like a whole food smoothie that we can make on our own. Protein bars, yeah, you want to be, you know, you can choose a more nourishing whole food snack. You know, we can pair fruit with nut butter. There are some bars, I'm sure you guys have availability to some bars over there, but like in the States, we have a lot of like fruit and nut based bars that are minimally processed and pretty nutritious and provide a very great balanced, convenient option for dancers. But you know, highly processed protein bars, there's a couple in the States that I can think of on the top of my head that I'm not the biggest fan of, and more so choosing and putting together a more balanced snack option would be the way to go.
And so what are some examples of balanced snacks that, you know?
So some of my favorites, like I said before, fruit and nut butter, maybe like some string cheese. I don't know if you guys have that in Singapore, but we have string cheese with like a whole grain cracker. I love edamame. That's another favorite of mine that kind of just gives you that contribution of protein and fiber, which is a good mix when it comes to snacks. Let's see what else. Even just adding some veggie slices with your crackers with hummus or guacamole is another great option.
And say, talk to me about fats. Why do we need fats in our body? Especially, you know, with dancers, they're always like, oh, I want to look lean. I want to look lean. I want to look, you know, in this certain shape. So, why are fats good for us, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. So fats, number one, there's definitely this fear around the word fat, but fat plays a really important role for our body, especially unsaturated fat. So my biggest example or my biggest reasoning why dancers should eat fats is because physical activity, especially strength training types of activity like dancing, can cause a lot of underlying inflammation in the body, and healthy fats do help to lessen that inflammation. So that's why I recommend healthy fats like avocados, or I think, do you have an allergy to avocados?
No, I don't.
Oh, so
And
you've asked me about, like, someone has
oh, that
asked
was
me,
it. Yeah, yeah, in the Q&A, yeah.
maybe you got a lot of questions about that. But olive oil, nuts, nut butters, seeds like hemp seeds, flax, chia, these are all other great sources of healthy fats that are great for lowering inflammation. The other important thing about fat is that it really helps with that word satisfaction that I spoke about earlier. So a lot of dancers, if you're following a low-fat diet, you'll feel this gnawing chronic hunger throughout the day, especially in the afternoon. That means you're not eating enough fat. And I really want to see a source of fat basically at every meal and snack that you're eating.
So then why won't fats make you fat?
That's a really good question. You know, at the end of the day, all three macronutrients the body is using for different ways. It's not like we just eat food and it just sits in our body. The body uses these macronutrients. It uses the calories coming from each of these macronutrients for very different metabolic processes. So essentially it's burning these macronutrients and using them for, or I should say burning the calories that these macronutrients are offering and using them for very specific reasons, whether that's building hormones, building muscle, supporting your metabolic processes like reproduction, bone building. So the body is just, it's constant. It's constantly using these macronutrients, it's using vitamins and minerals, and we need to make sure that we're providing these tools that it needs to do all of this. So it's not like we're just eating sources of fat and it's sitting on our hips. That's not the case. We're eating a balanced diet and we're providing our body with all of these tools that it needs to really complete all of those metabolic processes.
And what about what I was going to say? Something, I just had a complete brain fart. Are there any, if you're say a student, is there any, or like you're growing young dancer, is there any particular like things that you should be paying attention to more nutritionally, other things that you should be making sure to eat more of if you're like, say, a young dancer who's growing?
That's a good question. I would say, again, just thinking about consistency and balance, making sure that you're eating enough throughout the day is really important because you have your dance needs on top of your growth needs. Protein, healthy fats, fibrous, complex carbs, veggies, fruits that are full of vitamins and minerals, calcium and vitamin D. So whether that's coming from dairy or fortified dairy alternatives, or even something like leafy greens are high in calcium, you want to make sure you're getting those bone building nutrients because usually your teen years are your bone building years.
Right. And are there any things that, like, how different a diet of like a female versus a male dancer? Are there things that female dancers should be making sure to eat more of, or like male dancers should be making sure to incorporate more of in their diet?
That's a good question too. There's really not major differences between males and females when it comes to their nutrient needs, aside from the fact that maybe males might need slightly more throughout their day, more calories. Their body they tend to have more lean body mass, which basically is a more metabolically active tissue. That means that their metabolism is just burning more and thus they have higher needs. That would be the major difference between male and females. But in regards to the specific foods, there's really no major difference, really just focusing on everything I spoke about with just balance of those macronutrients and getting those vitamins and minerals in.
Right. And what do you feel about diets like intermittent fasting and keto and juice cleanses? Clearly, yeah, for these.
That's a great question. So I actually break down a lot of these different diets on my blog, dancenutrition.com. So I do encourage you read that. You know, in a nutshell, I don't recommend any restrictive type of thinking around your food. When it comes to intermittent fasting, we all can fast intermittently, but it's literally just going to sleep at night and waking up and having breakfast and breaking your fast. It doesn't have to be this fancy thing. Intermittent fasting especially can be very impractical for dancers, especially if you have late night performances and early morning classes. You know, if you're following a 16-hour fast, that's not going to support your energy needs for that class. So I really suggest straying away from these restrictive types of diets and focusing again on more of a less on this eat less mindset and more on this inclusive mindset around food, because that's what's again going to fuel not just your physical performance but also your mental performance.
Right. And what about juice cleanses? Can you clear the air? Is there really such thing as a cleanse?
That's a good question. So honestly, our body is our best source of cleansing.
Yes.
That's why we have our kidneys. That's why we have our liver. Yes. We even have our skin that cleanses us through sweat. So you do not have to pay for an expensive juice cleanse. You are well equipped to cleanse your body on your own. Just provide it again with all of those basic tools, provide it with chock full of vitamins and minerals. I like to say that a juicer is like doing the work our stomach should be doing, because our stomach is a muscle. So give your stomach, you know, the full-blown fruits and veggies as part of a balanced diet. No need to turn to any severe juice cleanses. Your body will cleanse itself.
I do want to talk a little bit about because of the strange state the world is in now, maybe people are not dancing as much as they used to, or people may be struggling with injury, or I think are not moving as much as they used to. And so what do you say to people who feel like they can't eat as much because they're not moving as much? And this doesn't necessarily extend to professional dancers or dancers who are injured, because I know that for me, as an adult dancer, sometimes you do feel the guilt of saying I can't eat as much because I'm not dancing 5 to 6 hours a day like a professional. So what do you say to people who feel like, because they're not moving as much, or for whatever reason, whether it's quarantine or not having a usual schedule, who feel like they just can't eat or shouldn't be allowed to eat as much?
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, we don't want to focus on this eat less mindset. So if we go into it and tell ourselves that we shouldn't be doing this or we shouldn't be eating this much, we are likely going to fall into that cycle of overdoing it, because we're naturally going to rebel from those thoughts. This is a good time for you to try intuitive eating. Intuitive eating being you have the time now to really sit down and focus on mindful eating techniques and listening to your hunger, feeling your fullness, feeling your satisfaction, really diving into what I do with my clients, which is a food and mood journal. And this is the best time to do that, because you're not necessarily running from classes to performances, commuting as much. So we have a little bit more time on our hands now. I know it's a very difficult time, but it's also a time that we're all going through together in regards to being limited in our performance. So it's not like, you're sitting out for an injury and all of your friends are moving forward. We're all stuck in the same boat right now. So it's important to remember that and keep reminding yourself that, and perhaps use this time to try something like intuitive eating, where you can really take advantage of more of your time and more of these mindful eating techniques.
I submitted some questions for you for a Q&A earlier, which is up on the Club of Victory Instagram. Go to check it out. It's not up on the Club of Victory Instagram yet. This podcast will just come out after it.
Don't worry. I got it. I think
scheduling content. But yeah, when we talk about intuitive eating, I did get a question from somebody who asked, should I only eat when I'm hungry? And what do you say to that? Because sometimes people eat out of habit. Like you said, sometimes people eat because, you just want to crave a bit of chocolate after, even though you're full. And how much of that can we incorporate into, and how much of that, I guess, gels with the idea of intuitive eating? And yeah, basically coming back to the question which somebody said, which is, should I only eat when I'm hungry?
So, for dancers, it's hard to go by hunger cues all the time because physical activity does blunt hunger. So many dancers might not feel hungry throughout their day. If they're going from classes and rehearsals, they really might not feel hungry, but I don't want them going a whole day without eating. So this is where we are not relying on our intuitive feelings of hunger. Now, you're asking something that's a little bit different. Like, you just ate a meal. You're not physically hungry, but you are craving something sweet. This is definitely more of a habit where we crave something sweet after we eat, but I have to be honest with you, it's a habit that I personally have, and I need to have something sweet after I eat dinner. So I am totally fine and really encourage dancers to honor those cravings. Even if you're not hungry, you can just do so mindfully. I'm not saying to have the whole chocolate bar when you are not feeling hungry. Remind yourself that things taste better when you are hungry versus when you are full. Now, we can still have a bite, we can try it, we can enjoy it mindfully, but really assess how you feel physically while eating it, and ask yourself, or tell yourself, I can have this tomorrow too. This isn't the last time I can eat this. So let me eat it mindfully. Let me eat it to satisfaction right now. And then perhaps save the rest for another time.
Yeah. And I mean, you did raise a good point about the fact that if you don't, like, how to put this, I know when I had my eating disorder, it's like you have this fear that if I give in to my cravings and the things I really want to eat, which at the time of recovery, I got to say was a lot of peanut butter sandwiches, which I think is actually a really good recovery food where you have an eating disorder because it's got carbs, got fats, got protein. But anyway, it was decided that if I keep eating it, I'm just never going to be able to stop eating it. But, you get to a point where if you honor your cravings, you'll realize that, you're not going to eat into oblivion because your body then learns that, oh, I'm satisfied now, I'm full, I'm healthy, I've got the nutrition I need, I've got the, like what I need to function physically and also mentally as well. I'm not starving or restricting myself anymore. Like, I'm good, I'm okay now. I don't, I feel like you reach a point where you don't want to eat everything in sight when you start honoring what your body needs.
Absolutely. A major part of this is trusting yourself that you can eat this tomorrow, that we don't have to enter that mindset of, I should eat all of this now because I'm never going to do it again. The second we have that unrealistic mindset, the second we are going to just overdo it with those foods. So once you break from that, and once you tell yourself that you can enjoy this food anytime the craving hits, you don't feel the need to overdo it.
And then what are some, maybe 1 or 2 tips you can share for people who are trying to overcome food guilt?
Definitely. So the first thing is you want to start reassessing your food rules. Now, I recommend doing this just slowly and one rule at a time. I don't recommend, if you are telling yourself that you shouldn't be eating sweets, that you shouldn't be eating fries, that you shouldn't be eating pizza, you don't have to break all of these food rules at one time. Just start with one. Start with pizza. Have it on a Tuesday. Don't save it for just a Saturday, because sometimes we enter this mindset where we can only eat these foods on the weekend, right?
Or the cheat meal idea that you see a lot of.
Exactly. So I suggest you challenge yourself. I have this article called Eating Pizza on a Monday. That's actually exactly what it's called. And challenging this food rule, having one slice of pizza, pair it with a salad if you want, but eat that pizza mindfully, and just start by breaking that food rule. That's the first tip that I have for dancers to just really build a more less restrictive lifestyle around food. The second is positive affirmations. Affirmations are a just very helpful mindset. I was about to say mindset game, but more of just a mindset mindset activity, just to kind of get you through some of these hard times, whether it's about your body image or about your actual food choices. I recommend putting them into the reminders app of your phone, just to help you realize that you can, again, incorporate these foods, and it's not going to be make or break your performance. It's not going to make or break your health.
Yeah. And just pulling up from that, people always think, oh, if I eat the hamburger and the fries and the cake for dinner today, like I have to repent and like make up for it with extra exercise or extra cardio or eating cleaner or less the next day to make up for it. I mean, like from a scientific or nutrition standpoint, can you illuminate, will eating that like one day of like indulgences, will that, I guess, make you gain weight? Do we need to repent?
You know, I often say that the very foods you restrict are the foods down the road you are going to overdo. So you may as well develop a healthy experience when you're eating these foods, or I'm sorry, a positive experience when you're eating these foods, because you're going to end up eating them anyway. So you can, I think dancers just have to realize that they can eat these foods in an enjoyable way rather than eating them with this notion that it's bad or that they shouldn't be doing it or that tomorrow I can't ever do it again. So that's just unrealistic thinking. Realize that you are going to do it again. So when you do it, make it a positive experience. Enjoy it. Do it. Eat them until a comfortable satisfaction, not an uncomfortable over fullness.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just have one last question for you, which is, this is called the Good Ballet Juju podcast. So I would love to know what is maybe one thing that you're doing to give yourself some good ballet juju right now, or to feel good about yourself.
Oh, that's a good question. Oh my goodness. You know, the first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is that I have to, I think, be a little bit more proactive in doing this. I think just because of the pandemic and having kids now at home and also working, I think that I tend to, and I'm being just fully honest right now, I think I tend to spread myself too thin, where I end up putting my own personal self on the back burner, and I have to be more proactive in actually not doing that.
The perfectionist thing.
Yeah. But, you know, a couple things that make me happy, I would say are, let me think about this. I'm sorry that this, I like giving myself facials. Okay. I happen to love skincare. So I like giving myself facials. And even though it's 11 at night, I'm probably going to go do it after we record this. I like drinking wine and just like enjoying, and obviously I'm of age, so enjoying a glass of wine with dinner is something that I enjoy doing, and experimenting with new recipes. I would say that's been like our weekend, a little bit of a weekend activity lately, whether we're experimenting with like a sweet or a savory recipe, kind of just like challenging ourselves to, and when I say us, I mean my family, just challenging ourselves to just try something different. Because again, we have a little bit more time right now that we're all home with quarantine. So I would say those are the things that we've been doing, but I could probably do a better job at being more proactive with my good ballet juju.
Hey, I think the wines are pretty good way to feel the good juju. I mean, you've got a kid, you've got a business.
Yeah.
You earned that drink.
Yes.
Not that we need to earn foods, but you earned that drink.
Exactly.
But Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And where can people find you?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure talking. It's a pleasure following you. I absolutely love what you're doing. You are a perfect example of us creating content and information that is changing the dance industry. So that is just huge in of itself. Dancers can find me on Instagram. I'm at To The Point Nutrition. They can also refer to my resource site, dancenutrition.com, which has a bunch of different resources. Everything on there is free. So I have free courses, I have free downloads, a lot of nutrition and body image type of activities. And you can also work with me. Go to my website, pointnutrition.com, and that's where you'll find my actual services of how dancers can work with me as their dietitian.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. And I hope everybody enjoys listening and are feeling the good ballet juju and the good nutrition juju that Rachel has shared with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure seeing you, and we will be in touch. We'll speak soon.
Yes.